If you've been on the online art community for any stretch of time, you likely heard or seen artists talk constantly about finding an art style. That, or complaining that their own art style is inconsistent. It has even become a point of contention on some circles of social media, the aforementioned art lore drama on TikTok, where people would bully others over their own drawing style. Even more established artists aren't immune with struggling with their own art style. Those of legendary skill like Takehiko Inoue and Hayao Miyazaki have both had moments where their own art wasn't coming out to their own standards. Art is deeply personal, and it's not surprising that many artists of pretty much any age group or skill level deal with issues regarding identity at some point of their art journey. For some artists, it is their whole art journey trying to communicate their ideas to the world, or trying to understand something about themselves that can't necessarily be put in words. But I wonder if we are taking the whole notion of having an art style a bit too seriously. Let me explain more. I'm Ayasuna and I make videos, more specifically art videos, and before we get into the main meat and potatoes of this video, I want to thank you all for reaching 100 plus subs recently. I only started making videos this April, and the growth and support that I receive is far beyond anything I ever expected. I do not take y'all's support for granted. I want to continue growing a community of chill, like-minded people, and in order to do that, I have to keep researching ideas for videos because I don't want my content getting stale. Since I'm mainly an art-based channel, I've been consuming a lot of art content lately, whether it's other YouTube videos, artist live streams, short-form videos, even art books and newsletters, pretty much anything I can get my hands on. Thanks to the internet, it has never been easier to get ideas and inspiration, as well as feedback from your artistic peers. But among the common trends of a lot of artist content that I've been watching, a lot of the advice I saw revolved around finding and developing an art style. And I think that's an area that a lot of beginners do get caught up on, is finding an art style. It's almost like an obsession. One of the reasons I'm talking about this topic is because in a recent live stream over on twitch.tv/Ayasuna19, in fact the same stream that this footage is from, I had a chatter ask me about my art style and what my inspirations were for my art. And when I sat back and thought about that question, I wasn't exactly sure how to answer it. Growing up, I watched a lot of anime as a kid and prefer animated series to most things. Some of my most favorite shows are like Avatar or The Boondocks, or maybe something like Danny Phantom. I know as a kid I tried to copy a lot of art from those shows growing up, but I couldn't really tell you what the inspiration is for my current art style. And I think part of the reason why it was hard for me to answer this because I, as a person as well as an artist, never really liked being tied down to any specific thing or niche. That's why I've tried a bunch of different mediums for art, whether that's different art forms like pottery, making beads and jewelry, doing crochet and other fabric artworks, or even just trying different mediums like different types of paints, markers, pencils, pretty much anything I could get my hands on. That's also why I've been trying a bunch of different art programs. I started off with Krita, then I moved to Photoshop, and now I'm currently using Clip Studio. Even just comparing my traditional art style to my digital art style, I can tell that my style is quite different between the two. My traditional art style tends to be a bit more rounder. I tend to use rounder features and faces, and my digital art is kind of the opposite of that. I think my point of bringing this all up is just to say that I didn't really consider or obsess too much over how my art style looked. I pretty much just started drawing because that's pretty much all I knew how to do. A common complaint I see online regarding art styles is that it's never quite consistent. One day you might be drawing with looser, fuller lines, and the other you might be a bit more stiff. I think the more that you draw and understand art, you realize that your own art journey will never exactly be linear. I've talked about that in previous videos, but I think for this one it's worth mentioning yet again. We often talk about our own art journey as terms of raw skill. And while skill is obviously important, we don't grant that same leniency to our own art style. And I think when we try to limit ourselves to draw a certain way all the time, I think it actually hurts creativity more than it helps. If we treat art as a journey, it makes sense that our art styles will evolve depending on what's going on in our lives, whether it's the media we consume or whatever else is going on. I'm not saying that art style isn't important at all to understand or develop. That's not what I'm saying at all. For instance, in a professional sense, it is important to understand what style you want, especially when targeting a specific audience. It probably wouldn't make sense for a show geared towards younger audiences to have those berserk levels of gore. Likewise, someone trying to make a webtoon probably shouldn't have something that's too detailed for them to draw every week or so. On the flip side, you may have artists who use quote-unquote style as a way to avoid areas where they might be struggling with. I'm sure we all had that OC that had extra long bangs, or maybe that hand tied behind their back because we didn't really want to draw the other eye. If we as artists constantly make these bad habit mistakes when it comes to anatomy and overall structure, it can be really hard to break out of them. And as a result, our art might stagnate, or we might have an quote-unquote inconsistent art style. I think sometimes artists can be a little bit misleading, not in any nefarious way as far as trying to teach others about art style. There's no quick way to learn a specific art style. It often takes a lot of years of practice to come up with your own. You don't find your art style finds you. You're probably going to continue struggling with finding your own art style simply because you haven't studied the fundamentals enough. You have to understand the rules before you can learn to tweak them. And frankly, I myself need to go back to studying fundamentals because there are some areas that I know I need to improve on. And I think part of the need for having such a definitive art style is because of instant gratification, which of course leads back to social media. I mean, back in the late 2010s and early 2020s, anime was quite popular in the West for the first time, at least more than it ever has been in the past. And as a result, a lot of artists flocked towards making their arts more anime-inspired. If you followed my sketchbook tour video, you saw that I did a lot of anime fan art back then. And I still do my reasonable share of fan art now. In fact, that's what I'm drawing here today. But the main difference between now and 5 years ago or so was that I was trying to copy the anime art that I saw, as opposed to now where I'm trying to draw the character in my own quote-unquote style. And in some part, drawing all that fan art back then was pretty fun. But to be honest, the real reason as to why I was doing it was because I wanted updates and stuff on Instagram and Tumblr. And to be honest, doing My Hero fan art was probably going to get a lot more attention compared to my own original artwork. I myself knew that I was doing this for engagement, and I started to not like doing it anymore. And that was one of many reasons why I fell into art block for as long as I did. I knew that if I wanted to be an artist and develop my own art style, I had to get out of this mindset. And part of that was studying the fundamentals. You can't always do what's popular and expect instant results. It almost never works, especially with art. Learning art can and should be a way to understand how to become an efficient problem solver. Understanding how to study and overcoming technical challenges not only allows for improvement, but also expands possibilities. As a result, part of understanding your style also comes down to your understanding of the mediums that you use and how you choose to approach it. Obviously, with digital art, the sky is the limit with what you can do, but with traditional art, you do need to take that into consideration. That said, even with extensive years of practice, it doesn't necessarily mean that your art style will ever be a static thing. In fact, it usually won't be. I already talked about the great artists of Miyazaki, Inoue, and Miura. But I think another artist worth mentioning here is Togashi. Yoshihiro Togashi, the creator of Hunter x Hunter and Yu Yu Hakusho, has a very interesting art style. Almost to the point where this and this are all drawn by the same man. Now obviously to get to the skill level of someone like Togashi, it obviously took many years of practice. But he didn't let what he was taught limit him as far as his own art style. He can go from one silly green boy with a fishing pole to something that's just downright horrifying. He proved that you don't need a set art style to be incredible with your work. Also, in spite of that, he's also married to the creator of Sailor Moon, which is also a fun fact that really didn't have anything to do with what I was talking about, but something that I still wanted to mention. Look, I need more people to talk about random anime facts with, so if you're interested in that, then don't hesitate to join my Discord. I'll have that link down in the description, but I'll also probably have it pinned to the top comment. All that is to say that sometimes we artists get way too one-track minded about things, and obsessing over art styles is one of those things. And it's not like I don't get it either. You do want to stand out, you want to share your vision with the world. But art style really isn't something that you can force, it comes with years of practice. Many of the artists that I mentioned in this video are still coming up with their own art styles for their works. I mean, look at the first chapter of Hunter x Hunter and compare that to the most recent chapter. Same for really any manga or animated series. As I've said before, artists do tend to be quite hard on themselves. And it's not totally without good reason. It can be hard to be objective over something that you probably spent hours doing. Style is obviously still quite important, especially if you do want a job in the creative field. But to say it's more important than actual fundamentals, I think that's just where it gets misleading. I think part of this is impatience, and some of it might also be immaturity. I'm saying some and not all immaturity because even more established artists also struggle with this. Cough, Ergo Josh, cough, Jazza, cough. And in ways I do think that it is a normal part of the art journey, like I said at the beginning of the video. Part of this is wanting to create a brand for themselves in order to make money. And before you screech, I don't think that there's anything wrong with using your art to make money. You aren't any more or less of an artist by doing so. Everyone has bills to pay. But in the art field, it's very unrealistic to achieve stardom overnight. Which is why I was so shocked to see that I got over 100 subs on my YouTube channel. Because art as a niche is typically very slow growing. So again, I had to thank y'all for that. When younger artists see art as a part of a brand, they may not be as receptive as learning it as if it were a skill. I think the issue is seeing art as such a commodity, and like I said, there's nothing wrong with making money off of art. There is a double-edged sword of seeing your art as the product over the process it took for you to get there. They may not realize that some of their most favorite artists also struggled with this as they were growing up. They had tons of perceived bad drawings that never even saw the light of day in the public. That social media's constant need for infinite growth is something that's not really sustainable for most artists, both mentally and physically. It can be a lot, especially for younger artists, as well as those who've been in the field for quite a long while and not really seeing the results that they want. Like I said, it's hard and art is deeply personal. Art can and should be a celebration of the human condition, whether that's good or bad, depending on perspective. For someone starting out, it can be harmful to put your art under a specific box. Related to that is being obsessed with giving art styles certain names. I'm sure a lot of people who are used to TikTok and the art community on there, they've probably seen a lot of the quote-unquote jelly art style. I feel like not every quote-unquote style really needs a label attached to it. I think art style is sometimes just is what it is. And I think that's where I mostly am with my art style. Obviously, I'm mainly self-taught and there's still quite a lot of stuff that I need to learn, but I think I stopped obsessing what my art style is or isn't. And in general, I tend to have a lot more fun with art when I stop putting it in a specific box. I think outside of a professional/educational field, I think it is okay to just make art and have it not take any specific box. Not every piece of art that you ever make ever has to go on social media. I've been doing digital art for a ton these past couple months, and a lot of what I've been doing didn't see the light of day. But that's okay, I made the art for myself, as well as me trying to understand how to use Clip Studio Paint. I wasn't worried about it trying to fit a certain art style, I just wanted it to be experimental, and I wanted to take the opportunity to learn about the program I was using. Obviously, it helps a lot in your own art style to study from old masters and people that you do like and admire. But being obsessed to it to the point that if you don't draw a certain way, you don't want to draw at all, it's a bit extreme. Your art style will come eventually, and stressing out about it doesn't make it come any faster. If anything, it probably does more harm than good. Style can be helpful in terms of making your art more recognizable. And obviously some artists really do like focusing on one specific area of art and mastering it. But what works for some artists might not work for every artist. After all, each person's journey is going to be a lot different. Other artists just do better by stop forcing themselves into a specific box and just being more versatile. Either way, it takes a lot of time. Art can and should be experimental. It challenges the way that you think and see the world. Being a master at a certain discipline isn't any better than being a jack of all trades. Both have their legitimate sets of pros and cons depending on how you choose to work. If you're starting out or you're just getting back into art after a long break or whatever, it's okay to not have an art style. It does not make you a bad artist. It is okay to make art for yourself and not other people, and especially not for social media all the time. I don't necessarily think that it's all that mandatory to have a set art style to appeal to social media. Historically speaking, some of the world's greatest artists tend to have quite a lot of diversity in their art style. And how they got to that level was by studying the fundamentals, as I mentioned before. The fundamentals not just include things like anatomy or composition, but also the techniques in which you use your tools that you have at your disposal. I mean, think about it, give all the greatest manga artists in history a pencil, and they'll all likely do wildly different things with it. Even something as simple as how you hold a pencil will determine how your art style will look like, at least traditionally speaking, although that is also sort of true for digital art as well. Something else to keep in mind is that there's no set time frame on how fast or slow your style will develop. Teaching younger artists/beginner artists that their art is a brand is detrimental for their own development. Even if you do want to become a professional artist, starting out this way is an unhealthy mindset to fall into. Even master artists don't constantly churn out art every day, on the hour, every hour. We are human after all, and sometimes things just don't work out. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to give up either. Style is something that evolves, it shouldn't be one static thing. I think the first few years of getting into art should be highly experimental. At this stage, it really isn't necessary to be locked down into a specific style. You should draw something because you want to do it, not necessarily because you think it's popular. For instance, I drew Anya because I really do like the art style of mouthwashing. In a world where a bunch of games have a bunch of hyperrealism, a game like Mouthwashing is most notable for its PS1 type graphic. I was also trying to get used to using a more muted color palette, as that's kind of what I wanted to go for my next series. The Big Keeper Star, to be more exact. Since I do want to make a webcomic eventually, I am learning how to simplify my coloring style, as well as my own art process. I know in this specific process I don't want to spend a ton of time just working on one character at a time. So if I'm working in that format, it makes sense that I need to simplify what I do. But before I can do that effectively, I do need to go back and study more fundamentals. I understand some of the things that I need to do, but I still could use a bit of a touch-up on my older skills that I may have lost over the years. Since I obviously don't have the money to hire a team to do all of that stuff for me, I'd have to learn how to make my art style a bit more versatile. I need to get better at studying storyboards and backgrounds and all sorts of things if I'm going to make this a series. I know I don't have to draw something as detailed as like Mura or Inoue, but I do know that if I want to tweak my style, I have to go back to the basics. And to be honest, that's mainly the art goals that I have for 2025. But I'm probably going to make a separate video on that. But regardless, I've been seeing the topic of art style come up a lot recently, especially on the online art community, and I just wanted to share my own 2 cents on the matter. Sometimes the art community can be a bit dramatic. Having a specific art style isn't the make or break that you think it is, and it bears repeating that you aren't more or less of an artist if you draw a certain way. Being flexible and adaptable with your art style isn't a death sentence as far as being an artist, and it definitely shouldn't be treated as such. In a world with generative AI slop, it may prove beneficial to be more flexible with your artwork. No matter how many prompts you give a machine, it'll never be as adaptable as an actual human being. We artists can literally make something out of pretty much any materials that we're given. And that's something that no machine can actually take away from us. But again, those are just my 2 cents on the matter. If you disagree, then please let me know down in the comments. I'm always interested in hearing other people's perspective when it comes to art. You really shouldn't take anyone's words at face value, including my own. These are just my opinions on the matter, and I'm no expert. I'm far from a master artist, and even if I were one, I can't speak for any other artist than myself. I don't have a set art style, and I don't necessarily want one. I continue to learn the fundamentals in order to improve drawing the stuff that I like, or the projects that I'm really passionate about. Maybe because I'm entering my mid-20s, I'm less concerned with appealing to social media pressures or trends. Obviously, the Hatsune Miku trend was actually quite fun, seeing different artists draw her from different nationalities. But part of what made that challenge fun was seeing all the different art styles associated with that. Since a lot of people know what Miku Hatsune looks like, it wasn't hard for artists to transform that into something totally unexpected, but still keep it in context to a quirky robot girl. I think that when artists adopt that type of thinking for their own artwork and original characters, I think that's a net positive for art as a whole. But that's pretty much all I had to say for this video. If you like what you saw, then don't hesitate to like and subscribe. I try to post videos every week, but since I'm a one-man show with making my art and doing my edits and voiceovers, it does take me a bit longer to create content. But just like with art, I'm learning to enjoy the process instead of fretting over timelines that I have in my head. So if you want a chill place to talk about art, then this community is definitely for you. And until then, goodbye and take care. Peace.